Hey Film Buffs, welcome back to Film Feature 43. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. That's okay with you, Kevin. Kevin always seems to have problems when we try something new here. And the thing that we're going to try new is dipping our toes into TV Feature 43, because what we're talking about today isn't a movie. It doesn't have any ties in with any movies. It's a standalone TV show. As you can tell from the thumbnail and the title of the video, we're talking about the TV show Community. So if you're not Kevin, go ahead and ask him if it's okay that we're doing this, and let's get into talking about it. If you don't know what Community is as a whole, this is kind of an interesting video for you to click on, but kind of the overarching narrative structure of it is it's based on a community college study group, and they go on these misadventures each week. It's really seen through the lens of one of the main characters who thinks everything is a TV show or a movie. So one week you can have a claymation Christmas special, the next week it could be a Civil War documentary spoof, and the next week it could be a David Fincher-esque crime thriller. So you never know what you're going to get. The storylines and the special effects make this show stand apart, specifically since it's not set in a galaxy far, far away. It's set in a community college, and they really go above and beyond with that kind of thing. It's something you wouldn't expect for such a small premise show. Also, one of the things that make Community stand apart is the jokes that it tells.
Would you stop tuning that guitar? You are 105 years old. Tell me exactly what you did with your life to end up here so I don't make the same mistakes. Excuse me!
It is one of the funniest shows I've ever seen, and it's what makes it one of my favorites. So that's why I was watching it for the 5th time a couple weeks ago, and something felt missing. I couldn't put my finger on it. The paintball was still there, the Darkest Timeline was still intact, and Troy and Abed were still in the morning. So I didn't know what it really was until I got to Season 5, Episode 10, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, where the study group keeps talking about the last time they played Dungeons & Dragons. And I had a vague memory of that, but I didn't remember seeing it in the lineup of episodes that I was watching. So I went back and looked and realized that there was a previous episode called, you guessed it, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and it didn't exist on Netflix. And then that jogged my memory into remembering that, oh yeah, Netflix removed that show 2020, I think, and that's why I didn't really remember it, because I didn't see it this time around. I knew something was missing, and that's what it was. So I went digging, and luckily I found it, rewatched it, and I thought it'd be the best way to introduce Community onto my channel, because I do want to talk about things like who really is the Ass Crack Bandit sometime in the future, in a future video. So I figured, what better way to dip my toes into talking about it than talking about this kind of controversial episode on the channel. This episode's different than a lot of episodes of Community. There's no big set designs, there's no really elaborate special effects, but it has a lot of heart, and it has great sound design and camera movement that puts it up there with your die-hard parodies.
Almost.
And your Star Wars spoofs, your Ass Crack Bandits, and your Luis Guzmans. I think this episode is one of the best. Once you look past the controversies, I believe that most people would agree how the characters act in this episode is how you think of the characters acting throughout the series. It's just a good representation overall of what the series is. So let's take a trip down to Greendale and talk about Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. So at the start of the episode, we're introduced to Fat Neil, who's in sharp mental decline because, well, everybody at the college calls him Fat Neil, including the professors.
Yes, Fat Neil.
And Neil fell again into darkness.
Which is something that I guess you would expect from Greendale, because the professors of Greendale really aren't the best. Jeff feigns interest in Dungeons & Dragons to kind of try to cheer up Fat Neil, who then in turn gives him his Dungeons & Dragons manual because he's not going to need them anymore, alluding to the fact that he's going to harm himself. So Jeff, in what appears to be altruism, gets the study group together, minus Pierce, to have a Dungeons & Dragons night for Fat Neil. They reluctantly include Chang because he overheard the plan, and they didn't really have the heart to tell him that he couldn't join. I feel like most friend groups have that one person who overhears a plan and they reluctantly let them join because they don't really have the guts to tell them, hey, we don't want you coming along. And if you don't know who that friend is in your group, Pierce in cartoonish fashion shows up to mock Fat Neil, take his sword and his cloak, and run off into the woods.
Pierce, I am Duquesne, of Clan Duquesne.
Dumb name. I'm gonna take a sword. Can I take a sword?
You've got a sword.
And instead of trying to complete their task as a group now, they have to go after Pierce to retrieve Neil's items. Britta tries to liberate some gnomes at a tavern in Britta fashion.
Beleaguered gnomes hurry to and fro with glasses of mead for the thirsty elves.
Beleaguered? Why are they beleaguered? Guys, we've got to do something about these gnomes.
And Annie the Well-Endowed pleasures a fair elf maiden for some Pegasi. Pegasuses. Hey Siri, what's the plural form of Pegasus?
The answer I found is Pegasi.
So I guess it's Pegasi, which sounds like a drink to me. And Pierce learns how to train his dragon.
Scream when I told you to scream!
Pierce Hawthorne is my master. Prepare to meet your doom.
All this culminating into us finding out that Jeff's altruism to help Fat Neil feel better is actually fueled by the fact that he feels guilty for giving Fat Neil the nickname Fat Neil to begin with.
Oh, they're down there by Fat Neil.
That's right, Neil. Your new best friend, Jeff Winger, coined the name Fat Neil.
Jeffrey!
Pierce slips up and is defeated by Fat Neil. This makes Neil happy and invites Pierce to play Dungeons and Dragons with him next week.
Hey, that was the best game I ever played in my life.
Don't mention it.
Want to play again next week?
This is actually called back to in a later episode after Pierce masturbates himself to death, in the fact that Neil gives a eulogy over the radio saying that Pierce was one hell of a D&D player, kind of alluding to the fact that Neil invites Pierce to play Dungeons & Dragons often after this whole situation happens. So that's the episode in a nutshell. Well, except for the fact of why Netflix would pull the show to begin with. You see, I deliberately skipped over that, although you probably saw it in the thumbnail. Chang dressed as a dark elf in blackface. This episode isn't a deep dive into whether it was okay for that joke to be made or it was okay for Netflix to pull that off of their streaming service or they shouldn't. That's not really what I'm here to talk about. Everything that can be said about the topic has been said. I'm not going to add anything new. Do I think it was an appropriate joke? Probably not, but Community really isn't known for their appropriate jokes, so I don't think people would be any more offended from this
Hey, Neil. This is gonna be awesome, yo.
So we just gonna ignore that hate crime, huh?
than they would be any of this.
And Annie knows a thing or two about guilt. Am I right, Jew?
Say the whole word.
Jewy?
Yo, 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 yo! What we got here?
This is a home invasion, you jive mother.
Yeah, that's right, honky. You take it real easy and give us all your expensive brandy and hubcaps.
Fine, then I chopped up both your bodies.
So that was us, and you were Magnum.
Still am, Pakistan. Want to try me?
Overall, it was a taking action for the sake of taking action and not doing anything really to help the situation, but my opinion doesn't matter. Like I said, everything's been said about this before, so let's talk about what actually makes this episode good, and that is the characterization as a whole. Like I said before, the characterization in this episode of each of the characters, except for maybe Pierce.
And you remember to let Fatty sit in my chair. Get out! You're stretching it!
Really is like their essence of their character. Every character gets a moment to shine in this, and what they do in this episode is exactly what you would expect them to do if you've seen the series as a whole and kind of know how these characters interact with each other. Shirley and Troy, who are my fourth and second favorite characters respectively, don't get a lot to do in this episode, but when they do, it is exactly how you would expect them to act. Shirley reacting to Chang.
So we just gonna ignore that hate crime, huh?
And reacting to Annie's elfish tryst is exactly what you would expect from her I'm religious, yet I still go along with things for the sake of the group personality that's kind of laid out through the whole series.
Ew, Hector the well-endowed? Abed.
I didn't know you just grabbed one at random. I made that one with Troy in mind.
Yeah, I bet you did.
Troy, on the other hand, reacting to Annie and taking notes of what she's doing.
I stroke her hair lovingly and spoon her for the appropriate amount of time before leaving.
How long is that?
And agreeing to play Dungeons & Dragons, even though he doesn't even know what Dungeons & Dragons is.
Shouldn't there be a board or some pieces or something to Jenga?
Really speaks to his naivete as a character, but willingness to help in any way possible. It also shows off Troy's hilarity as a character as a whole.
6 goblins are running toward you from the tree line, drawing daggers.
Oh! I attacked them using my additional notes.
It has no effect.
Next to Abed, he is my favorite character.
Huzzah!
I was really upset when Glover left the show.
Huzzah!
I like him in this episode, even though we only get a little taste of Troy. I think it's enough for you to understand that this is Troy's character. Annie's defining moment, like I mentioned before, where she sleeps with the elf maiden in great detail.
All right, I take her by the hand and lead her to the stable. I light a candle and rip off a piece of my tunic, which I fashion into a blindfold.
Oh, Hector, but I don't know if I...
I place it gently over the elf maiden's eyes.
To get the group Pegasus to help the greater mission really speaks to Annie's character as the youngest. Her and Troy, I guess, are the same age, but the youngest, I'm not a kid anymore trope that she really shows throughout the series, and the kind of shock and horror and maybe even a little bit of turn on-inness that the other characters get while she's describing this stuff really speaks to how they see her character as well. But as a character trait as a whole, it's kind of funny to look back on that because we find out later that she lives above Dildopolis, which is like an adult store, so her acting like this actually really is in character for someone who would live above there. The characters just don't know that yet because she hasn't moved out and lived with Troy and Abed yet until season 3. Britta doing her grandstanding of trying to free the fictional gnomes and her kind of fake SJW shtick.
Britta.
I want to know why these goblins are attacking us. Maybe these woods are their rightful land, and from their perspective,
You're the AT&T of people.
Really speaks to her character. After season 1, I feel like she really changed into this character who wants to try to be woke, but really isn't hitting that bar as well as she probably could if she put some effort into it. And even Chang being the only person in the room not to realize that painting yourself completely black and being so naive in that way, and even after being called out, still doesn't think it's wrong.
I'm a dark elf or a drow.
Shouldn't you be wearing armor or something?
I'm an elf, not a nerd.
Speaks to his character as a whole. This is a person who is deranged from
Experimental monkey fever.
I feel like this is actually more how Chang acts after he gets Changnesia and becomes Kevin. Even though this takes place before he tries to burn down the school.
Fire can't go through doors, stupid. It's not a ghost.
The two characters who get the most to do out of our main group, except for Pierce.
I don't like being excluded.
I know, I'll get to you in a second. As I was saying, the two characters who get to do the most is Abed and Jeff. As far as Abed goes, Dungeons and Dragons is right up his alley. This is a man who imagined a whole Christmas claymation world because his mom didn't come visit him for Christmas, and he also sent the whole school in a Flora's Lava frenzy just so Troy wouldn't leave. This fantasy world of Dungeons and Dragons, we can't see it in this episode because, like I said, it takes place in one kind of room bottleneck episode-esque format, but in Abed's head, you know he can see the dragon, or he can become the dragon, or become the gnome at the tavern. And his voices and how he interacts with each of the characters.
I am so sorry, madam. Please don't report me for execution.
Not overstepping his bounds as a narrator.
Can't hear you over the sound of me rubbing his sword on my balls.
Pierce, ew!
You have successfully rubbed your balls on the sword.
Abed, don't help him. You're the dungeon master. Just kill Pierce and give Neil back his sword. He's upset.
I'm the dungeon master. I have to be impartial.
You know that Abed is in his element when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. In the same way with Jeff being altruistic, but we then find out that the reason he's altruistic is because he did something wrong, who hurt the person that he's trying to be nice to. That is Jeff's character arc over the whole series. Him coming up with the nickname Fat Neil, and then coming up with his elaborate Dungeons and Dragons game to make him feel better, is vintage Jeff Winger. It's exactly what he would do from season 1 to the end of season 6. I feel like Jeff is the character who really doesn't change throughout the show as much as the other ones do. Pierce, on the other hand, I think for me is a little bit more cartoonish than he normally is. It's kind of like you took Pierce's character traits of not being wanted to be left out and people thinking that he's the dumb one in the group and boil it down and crank it up to 11.
Cast shape change on Duquesne.
What shape do you choose for him?
Fat.
Pierce, stop it!
Pierce!
Duquesne starts gaining weight. How much?
Make him as fat as Fat Neil.
I think he's a little cartoonish, but you almost have to be in this type of adventure where you need a villain of some sort, and Pierce, I think, is the perfect person to be that villain. The character beats as a whole. This episode nails it, and it's a good one to even maybe if someone wants to start the series but they're not exactly sure, showing them this episode opposed to the pilot, which you really don't get a feel for who the characters are in the pilot, especially someone like Troy and Britta who haven't been developed yet. This is a good episode to maybe dip their toes in if you can find it. Overall, the way that it handles the topic of suicide and depression and really in its goofy way works through those issues. It really works as kind of a jumping off point for this type of episode. I mean, when you're dealing with suicide and depression, you're not going to do this grandiose paintball episode or something like that. A smaller, more intimate episode is what you want to hit those beats on, and I think this episode does extremely well. But let me know what you think down below. Like I said, I'm planning on doing an Ask Crack Bandit video sometime to kind of give you my thoughts on who I think that is. If there's any videos that you want to see me talking about Community or any theories you have that you want me to look into, let me know. I love talking about Community, and I would love to do it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.